To get started.
Okay, I'll just say hi and let you know I was here.
Here. See if that's working correctly.
All right, so if people on the phone could please mute their phones, that would be helpful. So we're all ready to roll? Okay, we will call the Selectmen's meeting of the 20th of April to order. The first item is to review the minutes of April 6th. We still have somebody who's not muting. If they could please mute their phone. I guess we can do it here too.
All participants have been muted.
So we have the let's go to that. Wasn't it one of these microphones was the cause of that?
Sounds like it's coming from the speaker.
Yeah, I know, but I think one of these microphone sets may make that funny noise.
Mine?
Sure. Not mine. Oh, yours. I love technology.
Okay, so we have the minutes of April 6th. May I have a motion to accept them, please?
You can go.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on the minutes? None. If not, we can vote to accept them. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, moving to the next item. Under the COVID old business, one thing we must do this evening is to vote on a tax program. There are two tax programs that are being offered by the state, and we must choose one. One is a deferment program, which would defer the taxes due on July 1 for the quarter ending October 1, September 30th. And if we were to choose that method, we must have any taxpayer send in paperwork trying to support why they are requesting the deferment. And the alternative, we could also have it so that all residents and businesses and so forth paying personal property, real estate, you name it, would have a deferment. And that would not require paperwork, but obviously there could be a significant number of, if the whole tax base were deferred for 3 months, that would cause different problems trying to have the town raise money from its surplus to cover the shortfall. The second program is a 3% instead of an 18% low interest rate comparatively. And just as normally taxes are paid during the month of July. People would have that time frame to pay during July without penalty. If they had a balance due at the end of July, that would accrue interest at an annual rate of 3% or 0.25% per month. And whatever outstanding it was from during that quarter would be then billed at 3% annual. I believe the low interest rate program would be the most advisable because it would provide a relatively reasonable relief to taxpayers paying at the rate of 3% instead of 18%, but likely we would not have a tremendous amount of people using that because not many could get 3% for 90 days if they didn't pay their taxes, the people who had the funds to do so. Be mindful that during that time, any tax escrow payments would be required to be made on time. So that, I'm not sure what percentage of our taxes are escrowed, but they would still be required to be paid on time by the banks and so forth. So we could discuss the options more fully if you'd like, and then we would need to vote on one of these, and we need to send a communication back to the state of Connecticut with our choice.
I think we do the 0.25%. Was that the second one?
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be a little better. This way, people will still be paying their taxes, and there won't be penalties. Penalties very severely.
Mm-hmm.
Tim, do you know of any towns that are doing both programs?
I've not heard. Some are doing the deferral, and depending on the number of tax accounts which have escrows, we would get those in any event. So, but as I say, if the deferral were offered to everyone, because if the persons who wanted the deferral had to send in paperwork, if we had 1,000 or 2,000 people who said, gee, that sounds pretty good, or I do wish to get relief, they would have to fill out a form. And the other is to waive it for all taxpayers. And I think still the escrow taxes would come in, but depending upon how many tax accounts there would be, beyond that, we would have to make up the funds to pay bills. Likely the school would still be charging for their payments, you know, our budget would have its expenses that we would have to meet. So there might be a few things we would cut back on. Board of Finance might say in that instance we could hold up on certain things, but it would be a fair bit of work to figure out what we could defer for that quarter. Also, if we have funds in a certificate of deposit, the town money, then we would need to keep that in mind. If we went to a bank and said we needed some funds out of a CD that didn't mature until later, there might be some early withdrawal penalty for that. So,
Or we'd have to authorize some notes or something. There would be other options
yeah,
we could take.
which would incur a cost of some sort as well. So I think the least disruptive would be the 3%. As I say, it would provide some comfort for those who were having trouble, and but it would be an incentive for most of the taxpayers who would normally pay to make the payment.
Mm-hmm. It's my understanding that under this executive order that landlords would have to, if they are a landlord, they would have to give the same option of whatever we choose tonight to their tenants if it's necessary.
That's right. If a landlord submitted a tax deferment, if they enjoyed a tax deferment, they would be expected to pass that benefit on to the rest of the tenant base.
I think it's either. I'm not sure how that would work exactly, but I think either program they're required to. That's how I read it. So even if we went with the 3%, if a leasee asks for the same relief.
I don't know if the landlord paid on time, say during the month of July, there'd be no penalty. If they chose not to pay and seek to take advantage of the 3%, I don't know how that would work. I don't think it really goes into the detail about that, because it's obviously less than 18%.
Yeah, I think, maybe I wasn't clear. I think if we as a town, or as a Board of Selectmen, authorize the 3%, if the landlord has a tenant that asks for, or has an overdue lease rent, that the landlord is required to give that tenant also a 3%, it's not a grace period, but 3%.
A penalty rate of some sort?
I guess, yeah.
I don't know for sure.
I read that like 5 times, and I don't understand exactly how that would work, but it was easier for, at first I read it, well, that means it's the deferment program, and I read it again, and it's either, so.
Yeah, let's see, there's another order which I think prohibits landlords from eviction with certain grace periods and so forth, so that's another thing that works in favor of the tenant.
It's just, I guess it's just something to know if we get any cards or letters. I don't know about the other quasi-municipalities within our town, but the way I read it is it also requires the other quasi-municipalities to... Right.
Yes, that's correct. And in fact, I had a conversation with O'Colony, and they're following. They will have the taxing districts within our town have to follow suit. If they are a taxing district that spans one or more than one town, they can make their own choice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, in my opinion, based on the things we've talked about, the nice thing about the 3% is that it applies to everybody. Mm-hmm. So I think that's fair, more fair than the deferment program. Certainly, obviously, a lot less labor intensive for the town, and it helps us with our planning. But I like the aspect that it's fair for everybody. Mm-hmm. So I would agree that would be my preference too.
All right. Well, if we're of a mind, we can vote on that.
I'll make a motion that on April 20th, 2020, the Board of Selectmen adopt the low-interest rate program identified under the Governor's Executive Order 7S, Section 6B.
Okay. Second. And moved and seconded. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
All right, thank you. We will.
Do we have to do a motion to authorize you to sign the work?
I don't think so. There is a form which I pulled off, which goes to the state. I thought I had it attached here. It's a simple fill in the blank form. So I believe no. So I think we should be fine.
Here's well, I haven't scribbled on it, but you can take it. There you go.
Great. See. So it says the municipality of Lyme, by determination of our local legislative body or in the town which the legislative body is a town meeting by vote of the Board of Selectmen, voted and approved on a certain date, will participate in the following program. So it calls for a signature and a CEO certification. Doesn't seem to have a separate resolution to empower the CEO. So okay, I'll make sure. I think I did this as well. But okay, very good. And while we're on that, Executive Order 7-T is in Tango, which concerns the short-term rental. Following the governor's conference call about 10 days ago, I spoke with Commissioner Lehman of he's with the community development, and we talked about the purpose stated in 7T says that short-term rentals are prohibited for periods of time 31 days or less. And the express purpose is to provide housing for emergency service and other persons needing to be housed separate from their families. And so I spoke to the commissioner saying that we have undoubtedly a number of rental properties, some of which are a primary source of income for our taxpayers, one of which is in the top 10 taxpayer list. And I said, is there a clearinghouse so that if this goes on, that certain landlords would be able to link up with persons who needed to be isolated? And I did not get the impression there is a clearinghouse. So I asked, well, if in fact there are no takers, that would be regrettable that the properties would stand vacant, and they would perhaps have a grave financial hardship. What he said is that persons, landlords would not have to cancel their whole summer's worth of business at the outset. They could go month to month and see what may be happening would improve that. So if May comes along and there's no change in the executive order, then indeed bookings for May would have to be deferred, canceled. If June came along, same thing. July, same thing. So there was no assurance that this would have a sunset on it until the executive order were lifted. In terms of we could go out to put on our web, communicate to maybe the Federation and just generally that those who have short-term rentals, the executive order is in effect. And in terms of enforcement, there was nothing stated in the order, but I know that the protocol for the state police, and the town police would be responsible for enforcement, probably based on some reporting of a violation, I expect. I don't think there's the expectation that the police would be required to go surveilling through the neighborhoods looking for license plates or any other thing. I think it would be based on probably somebody saying that there is a property that's being improperly rented. So I think the state police nor the state of Connecticut wants to have serious legal action taken against landlords. I think they'd probably counsel the landlord that the executive order is in effect and that they must not violate the executive order, and give them a talk to, and maybe if they persisted, then they'd have to step it up. I think we all know that the courts are not wanting to see this type of litigation coming in. So I think that they would they would try to nip it in the bud, so to speak. But if somebody wantonly disregarded the order, then things would have to happen. So the only comfort is that it'll be reviewed as necessary to try to lighten it up. But at this point, it is in effect, and that's all we know. So we'll just try to get the word out and counsel people, and hopefully this will be lifted at some point before the summer happens. It'd be a big consequence to a number of people. Any other thoughts on it?
Revisit every selectman meeting, I guess.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to put something out on it.
I don't know whether you want to talk about it, but I don't know if we lowered our flag yet as a
Yes.
result of COVID. We did?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, because I know last week we didn't, so I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I remember Gary Yucknut had a great suggestion that the day newspaper, or any of them, might have a little image of the flag on the upper right corner of the front page with the position of the flag, so that, remember with the Middle East War and other things, there were frequent lowerings of the flag, and it would be handy if there was some daily thing that came out, such as a newspaper, that would show the position of the flag, and then everybody would know without having to go through a lot of communication.
That's a nice idea. But this came out on April 8th, I think, so I just wanted to make sure we were on top of it.
They're good. On other things having to do with the coronavirus, why we still have cases happening in Old Lyme. I think for the last week it's been steady, but I think you see people in the store, grocery store and so forth, with masks on and gloves on, and I think our residents are doing a very good job at trying to protect themselves and others. I think even the grocery clerks beside the plexiglass shields they too are having face masks. They're certainly in the front line, and so I think as citizens we're doing a pretty good job. We'll be talking a little more about some of these other items, but I think I think people have done a pretty fine job at complying with the standards. Turning to the updates of projects, the Soundview sewers, they're nothing particularly new. I think we did our last week. We executed one document for Woodward and Curran to do to get their agreement signed for their work. And I know behind the scenes there's still work trying to iron out the details of the common assets, the community collection pipe, the pumping station, and the force main. So there are a number of documents that are in the works, and hopefully we can finalize them. That would require the beaches, Old Lyme Shores, Old Colony, and Miami, plus the town, and their respective WPAs to execute these agreements. And basically they outline what needs to be done by whom. Because the three beaches are further along than we are, they have expended money to engage lawyers and consultants to work on these common assets, and ultimately the operating agreements on how things are paid for and the capacity and so forth. So because we will be joining after they have a three-part agreement right now. We'll be joining as the fourth party. That's what we're working on, and we would be expected to pay a certain sum of money to come in that be our pro rata share of what's been spent, and as things happen toward the end of this year, hopefully, and into next year, we would be paying our share as well. So I'm hoping shortly we'll have some documentation that will be ready for signature, and there will be a easement, particularly for Old Lyme, to have the collection pipe and the force main go over our streets and one alley, and so that would require a town meeting, which I think we need to have in person. It could attract a crowd of people, and trying to work it remotely would be difficult, I think. So hopefully we'll be in a position to have a live town meeting for that. No word on the Connecticut Water starting up. They're still on shutdown. So I think hopefully in the next couple of weeks we should be getting closer to having final documentation, and then we can present that to the board, and it would be ready for the town and for the WPCA to sign up, but we're not there yet.
Can we chat about this?
Mm-hmm.
Can we chat about it?
Oh, sure.
Okay. I dropped off the call, the WPCA call that we had last week before it went into executive session. But one of my questions, and maybe you guys could tell me if it was resolved, the cost you referred to about signing, being a part of it, was that detailed as to what that cost is and how they came up with that?
There is a list of the payees, and I guess you can drill down to get the actual invoices that support those numbers. And I believe that the treasurer of the WPCA, in addition to the chairman, is going to review those costs to make sure that they're related to common things and not individual beach things.
And that payment, once it's verified by our WPCA, how is the town paying that? Is that going to be, is it a down payment before the water, we get money for the water funds? Is Nicole involved in that?
Yeah. I believe that the WPCA believes they could pay it from their budget if they got permission from the Board of Finance, because they don't have money that's specifically earmarked for this purpose. They have things like legal and engineering and consulting and so on, but I think to be truly transparent, they would need to go through us as Board of Finance and to the Board of Selectmen and Finance to detail what it is, and anyone who would care to look through it to satisfy themselves that this is appropriate before any payment is made. I think where I'm not totally clear on the sequence of funding, because obviously you have clean water money is part of the equation. We know that in the end there would be a 25% clean water grant, and then there'd be 2% money to help finance it. But between now and there, I think we need to understand clearly how the funds flow will work. So if a bill comes in and it's to be paid, then heretofore, I think Old Colony Beach has been paying the expenses on behalf of the other two beaches and hopefully the town of Old Lyme. So as something comes along, we need to know how we're going to pay it, from where it comes from in our budget, and then there will be a submission by the WPCA to the DEEP for reimbursement, but I don't believe legal, for instance, is an expense that is reimbursable through clean water. I think the engineering expense is, and certainly the hard costs, and I think legal is an exception. So I think we need to have a clear understanding as to how this will all work going into the future. It's sort of like a construction loan to build a house where you need to line up your money, and then at the end it'll all convert to a permanent type of arrangement, but we need to be sure how it works and where the money's coming from to pay these interim bills. So that'll be a job for the WPCA and the Board of Selectmen and ultimately the Board of Finance. And then it'd be nice to have a cash flow projection as to what kinds of expenses will be coming down the pike, how they're paid, how they're reimbursed, and then ultimately the permanent loan and what happens when the project is deemed complete.
So the cost sharing agreement then is not signed yet?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I guess the next item is the community connectivity grant, sidewalks. I guess you've been leading the charge on that.
Yes, we had a meeting on April 7th, a conference call that was recorded, and the committee heard from our design engineer, BSC group. They had to move their offices offline, so there was a little bit of delay in getting everybody back on the project. And BSC shared with us at that point that they needed to go out to do some additional measurements, just data gathering primarily, as a result of the drone flyover. They wanted some more specific measurements, and they wanted to come out the following week. So there are 5 properties that the engineers thought they needed to actually physically go on and do their measurements. So the committee was able to get the okay from 3 out of the 5 homeowners. The other 2 received a letter. I'm not sure if the town got anything back from them. But anyway, all they are is photographs and some measurements. The BSC did go out on April 14th to complete that task, and then we meet again tomorrow by conference call, recorded conference call, to get an update on what the layout now looks like. I also got a note that we should expect our first bill from BSC Group soon. I saw a draft and it needed a couple of typos corrected, and I let Nicole know that it'll be coming at about $5,000. But I figured hopefully we'll be able to, the committee can okay that tomorrow on the conference call. But it basically is for the work done to date for the layout. And then we're hoping that we'll hear tomorrow enough so we can plan to have a preliminary design conference call early May, and we'll be talking about having the design shared with the community towards the end of May. Mm-hmm. How we can do that.
And will the Route 156 north side sidewalk, is that boundary being firmed up too as part of the flyover?
I hope we'll hear that tomorrow.
Good.
They were primarily looking at Hartford Avenue this week or last week when they went out. I know they want to have a discussion with DOT District 2, but in our last conference call, we thought it might make more sense to present to DOT what we would like to have happen on that stretch of road and hopefully get DOT's okay based on that versus asking, what do you want?
Yeah.
We go in with a plan of what we'd like to see, which I thought was smart. So that's what we'll probably be talking about some more tomorrow.
And the width of where we can work within, I guess.
It's really DOT's purview, but we'd like to go in with what we'd like and see what we get.
That's probably what, 5 feet? That you'd
Probably.
like, yeah. So I guess we pay for the BSC, and then the grant pays for the actual work.
The construction is the grant, yeah. Yeah. The design engineer, the town approved paying for it was $40,000
And they think that's a good total still.
so far.
Yeah.
This is our first bill, though.
Yeah. Okay, good. All right. Turning to new business, we have the potential beach closure due to the...
About Mount Creek Bridge? Yeah.
Oh, right, Mount Creek, sorry. Yes, I called Todd Macknick of Macknick Brothers, and he's still in South America. He went there for vacation and has not been able to return for probably 2, maybe 3 or 4 weeks now. But anyway, I talked with Tom and asked him how we are in terms of starting this project. And I think it's still looking to be early May. So the contractor is to have signage that would be placed at different parts of the points coming into that work area. And I think we're going to put out a letter to the residents, the greater neighborhood, so a lot, probably even a town-wide thing really, because a lot of people use that Mile Creek Road for access, and so it might not be sufficient just to do the logical streets around the area. It might be wise just to inform everyone. We could do that either electronically or perhaps with a mailer. But that, he thinks, would probably be a closure for probably 2 months plus. Might be 2.5, hard to say. One thing that has to happen is the utility needs to come in and move the power going over the bridge because the crane that they use to lift these precast bridge parts is pretty tall, and if the line is anywhere near the edge of the road, that's not good. So that'll be an important thing to have taken care of. So they're working to make sure that happens. If that is delayed, that'll be a delay, because once that, he has to do some preliminary work on the abutments, but once that's complete, then trucks bring the precast bridge sections and they're lowered. They don't want to have them placed on the ground and then lower them a week or two later. They do it right off the truck into where they're supposed to go. So that will be that'll be a welcome thing to get that project underway. And one silver lining is, with the school closed, we don't have to worry about school buses going through there. That should all hopefully be taken care of before school starts up in the fall. Okay.
Is there an inspection process?
Yeah, there. I'm sure there's I'm not sure who the inspector is, but there is an inspector budget. I think actually Jacobson has a line in its quotation for inspections. Yeah, part of that.
Thank you.
Turning now to the possible beach closure, I think that we've talked before about the prospect of Sound View and attracting a lot of people once the weather turns. I was called by the state trooper this Sunday, even though it was fairly cool and pretty windy at the shore. There were a number of people there, and I think once it gets 70, 80 degrees and beautiful beach weather, we're going to have a lot of people, and so we I think need to prepare to restrict that crowd if it shows up. The Miami Beach it's unique because the beach owns 2 Miami Beach, but then there's that deed restriction where the public can go on the beach. So if Miami Beach is in agreement, I think we would want them to be on board to have the beach closed so long as the governor's restrictions are still in place. I think we've heard of a few instances already with not so good weather that we have clusters of people who are not doing the separation, and it's almost like it's summertime. They're not acting in appropriate ways entirely. That's unfortunate because I'm sure a lot of people would like to walk on the beach and keep separated and so forth and go about their business, but I think we have to prepare for the fact that once the weather gets good and sunny, we will have to take some proactive steps here. I know that we have to have a conversation with the establishments there. I think the rule is if you have takeout food and beverage, that is truly supposed to be takeout. You're supposed to get in your car and go home, and you're not supposed to go to an area on the beach and consume it. So I was in on a conversation with the health district, and they are focused on that. They don't want to have takeout food being consumed on the beach. So we'll have to go down and have a conversation and make sure everybody's on the same page here. We don't want to have problems with that. So I've had some preliminary conversations with Miami Beach Association, but they haven't concluded as yet. So I think once we do, then we'll have I don't know that we have to lower the boom right now, but I think we've talked about it, and I think we don't want to do it the day after a big hot sunny day. I think if we intend to have a closure, we need to probably anticipate rather than react to a good pattern of weather. So I'd appreciate your thoughts on it, and if we have consensus, then I think we can set it up so that, looking at the long-range map, if we see a good warm spell coming, we can implement a plan. Yeah.
Tim, it sounds like you're just talking about Soundview.
If we do anything with Soundview Beach, then we would have to, of course, include White Sand Beach, the town beach. Because you may recall the Greenwich lawsuit, town beaches are town beaches, unfortunately. Another question came up: if somebody living in Miami Beach wanted to use the beach, but there was a general closure to the public, could a resident of Miami go to the beach and go swimming and so forth? I don't know if there'd be an exception for that would would be okay or not. We'd have to find the answer to that. Certainly the other beach associations with gates and so forth could regulate that, and if they chose to have people on the beach, that would be their property, private property, they could do that. Miami's a hybrid, so if you could feel that, okay, a resident should be able to go to the beach, but if it makes the prohibition for people coming out of the beach void, that's not going to be good. So we need probably some advice on that. White Sand Beach and actually Haynes Park, the beach there are town beaches. So even though Miami is Miami property, Hartford Avenue, that's how you get to it. There are other ways, I'm sure, but that's the primary way. So if we close our parking areas and so forth, we're really basically closing Miami Beach as well. Hopefully there'd be an agreement.
Can I just say something? Should your policy coincide with selling of the beach, the parking as well? Parking pass? Because
the question came about parking passes. I think that we've talked about selling parking passes with the understanding that if the beaches are closed for an extended period of time, there would be no refunds. On the other hand, you could say, well, possibly we could hold back until we know a little more and then offer them for sale, and then people could buy them once we saw that there was going to be, the beaches would likely be open. I think at this point we don't have any clarity that the beaches will be open. You can hope for June, July, August, but the longer this goes into the next month, then if we get to July, there's not going to be a heck of a lot of interest in beach passes probably, but maybe there would be. So we've kicked it around whether we might offer the beach passes for sale, but I think people would logically be very disappointed if they spent $25 on a beach pass and they couldn't use it all summer. But if we do start selling them, I think it has to be on a no refund basis, because that would be pretty cumbersome to give refunds. So we'd probably want to hold off a little while longer and then flip the switch when it looked like things were about to happen in a favorable way.
Tim, did you get any feedback from East Lyme on what they're thinking?
I think East Lyme, the hole in the wall, has some access. Mm-hmm. I think we have a unique situation where, with the liquor establishments and just the whole way Soundview has evolved, we have a far different crowd that shows up. We can get 1,000 or more people showing up on a good weekend, and I don't think that these other towns have that same influx. I talked with Westbrook, Saybrook, and East Lyme, and I think they're not sure what's going to happen, but I just don't think that they would have the out-of-towners coming to the same degree we do. So I think we're a little different.
Are we going to need more enforcement in that down there?
If we actually decide to close the beaches, we'll probably have to have the police and rangers, setting the tempo.
But even if we don't close, and if the governor's orders are still open, that 5 or less people, are we going to need more people, enforcement people down there to encourage them?
That's the thing. if you have a day that's half nice but not totally nice, and you have not actually shut the beaches, and then we would only have probably maybe 3 or 4 police officers able to be available, and that's in the whole town. We have rangers, which are young adults that are capable of helping out, but they're not able to issue summonses and do what police do. So I think we would probably be wise to make a decision ahead of time, and then if the beach is closed, we could have, for instance, an electronic sign near exit 70 on the interstate as you come down on 156 saying Old Lyme public beaches are closed. I don't know if we could get that on Route 9 coming down. There's an electronic sign in Essex. The state parks are doing it based on a number of cars coming into Hammonasset or Rocky Neck, so maybe beyond that they have to send security people to make sure the clusters don't happen, notwithstanding they limit the cars. But it would be pretty difficult if there was a very large crowd to have our relatively small number of officials controlling it if we got behind the curve on it.
Well, could we use, we hired a couple more part-time guys. Can we, dedicate maybe, if we do end up closing the beach, put a part-time guy down there on Saturdays and Sundays?
Yeah, I think
especially.
If we close the beach, we could definitely have police presence at the top of the streets, perhaps to say the beach is closed, and you might even have rangers doing that. And if it's a resident, then of course they could go through. But if it's somebody that is not a resident, they're not going to make them show IDs, I guess. But if they drive in and they've been told it's not, the beach is closed and it's for residents only, that should hopefully do a lot. And then you'd need some police presence available. Probably for the first time or two, you'd need a lot of attention there, because they'll come on foot, they'll come from different directions. So the first couple of weeks would be difficult to get the word out, but finally, hopefully, if it persisted, once they learn, then hopefully they would not come back down without checking. It'll be a problem.
Okay. Week by week, I guess.
Yeah, pardon?
I guess we got to take it week by week.
I think so, yeah. And I guess once we pull the trigger, then you probably stay with it, because we don't want to maybe turn it on and off like a faucet, because it's confusing. And if the state says it's okay to let people enjoy the beach, then so much the better. We're back to normal. But once you make that decision, it's probably too confusing to say it's closed this week, check with us next week. I don't know. That'd be pretty tough, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think I would suggest you maybe have a meeting with public safety and run different scenarios. I mean, the rangers are going to have masks, and there's probably some equipment that we haven't thought about that they may need to protect themselves. Also, depending on where we're at.
Yeah, because they'll be coming from all over the state probably, and so far so good. We have 9 cases, so it's not like we've been deluged, but if you have 1,000 people coming into town from all over the place, you don't know. Well, speaking of officers, we did have a swearing-in ceremony, and Benjamin Paul DaCrosta and Matthew Ward were sworn in as our new part-time officers, so that's very welcome. They will be pretty busy, I expect, if one of these, when we decide what to do here.
So what's our force now, Tim? What is our police force now? How many full-time and part-time?
Well, we have 6 regular and 2 part-time,
Okay.
and some rangers.
And then the resident state trooper.
And you could always prevail on the state to help out, but those troopers come at a pretty fancy price, so if we can do it with our internal people, so much the better. Next up is the Board of Finance hearing, which will happen at 7:30 tonight. It's a WebEx type of presentation by Chairman Andy Russell. I think the information is on the website as to how to dial in. I think you can dial in as for audio or dial in with a web camera link as well. So that'll be at 7:30, and he'll go through his presentation. I think the next step there would be in May, when I think it's the 3rd week of May, Monday, the Board of Finance will host the vote on the town budget. It won't necessarily be a town meeting unless the governor allows us to do so. And if it is the Board of Finance, they would also have a meeting and vote on the budget as the Board of Finance, and that would be the final step for the budget. The school is 2 weeks ahead of the town customarily, so that the school number is plugged into the town budget prior to the actual vote, of course, and that would be that. So tune in later on if you want to hear the Board of Finance presentation.
Tim, I think I mentioned at our last meeting a couple weeks ago that with the executive order, I thought that the Board of Selectmen had to authorize the Board of Finance to finalize the budget and set the mill rate. And I think I passed out what Essex did.
Okay, we can look into that.
Well, I think we should do it for the hearing. I drafted.
Well, the hearing's just a hearing.
Well, we won't be back together for a while, and I want to suggest that
the vote is in May. So if we have to, if there's some extra step that the Board of Selectmen must take.
I think we do per Executive Order 7I. I think we have to have a motion. And I was suggesting that we say that today, that the Old Line Board of Selectmen authorize the Old Line Board of Finance to adopt a budget for fiscal year 2021 and set a mill rate as per Governor's Executive Order 7I, Section 13.
Okay, if we want to do that, we can do it now or as well. So you would make that's a motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Also,
It was moved and seconded to empower the Board of Finance to follow the procedure then. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, good. The Memorial Day contingency plan, where it's still in the talk stage, but if Memorial Day is likely not to happen, which I think it is likely not to happen, we could try to have the parade itself later on. 4th of July is very soon after, it's a month, so that's a possibility, or Midsummer Festival, which is the 25th of July. I received a communication from Cheryl Poirier up at the Flo Grizz having to do with what's happening. The committee working on the Midsummer has not made a decision about the Midsummer itself, and the various participants would also make their own judgments. But if Midsummer were to continue, of course the Florence Grizzle would have to be on board because you have a Friday event, Friday evening, the music at the Florence Grizzle, and then Saturday they host a lot of activity there, plus a number of other organizations. If we had the parade on the 25th, Midsummer, conceivably it could take off from the school, the firehouse, excuse me, and go to the cemetery and go back. The one question, or a couple questions, is that the school bands are a big part of the parade, as are the Park and Rec teams that march in the band, in the parade. So, in talking with the superintendent, he was not sure whether the bands could actually play. They haven't rehearsed, and some have instruments, some may not. So, if we were really thinking of doing that, we'd probably need to check more thoroughly with the school band people and see if there's a hope that that might happen, and with the various teams that march in the parade. Certainly with respect to the participants, some may not feel comfortable even if we did reschedule it. Some might say, well, we're not convinced it's safe. So, hard to say. But we've talked about it with the organizers of the parade, and no decision's been made, but we're hoping it could happen. So it's just an agenda item to keep in our minds and see what happens.
I spoke with the fire department, with the chief, and they're open to possible availability for if we do it on Midsummer March, they can make it happen if we wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah. Well, it could be, if it were to happen that day, there'd be a lot going on in town, and it could be very nice, but we'd have to make sure that the parade would not louse up the midsummer activities. I know they start running buses. I think they start at 9 o'clock, and I'm not sure how much happens past the fire station at that time of day. Generally speaking, when the parade goes down the street, it's busy going down, but on the return, it's a lot less. So you could say, well, once the parade gets to the cemetery, then it could simply stop, and you wouldn't need to have everybody march back if it were disruptive to things on Lime Street. So we have time to figure this out if we can. So. We'll take it step by step.
If the Flogriz and the committee determines that they're not moving forward, it's just canceled for 2020, right. Correct?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. If the event if they were to cancel, they said that they would not try to schedule it later in the year.
Okay.
And I suppose if they canceled, probably the parade would cancel, because I don't know that there'd be a reason that they would cancel, that the parade people would feel the same way. So we'll hope. Next up is the U.S. Census. I'm sure everyone has received the blue communications from the census, and I think they are now giving us a little more time to work with it. So it doesn't take long to go online and fill it out. And one could also get a paper copy if you want to do it that way. But it's something that if we can respond, I think there was an observation that Old Lyme had a relatively low percentage response. So the census person called me, and I said, well, can you tell in parts of town, is there a variance in the response rate? And she said yes, and it turned out that the beach area was quite low. for obvious reasons, because they're going to all these seasonal cottages. So I said, well, that's undoubtedly the problem. The mailing is going to addresses where folks don't live at this time of the year, and they are likely citizens of different towns and not Old Lyme in terms of the census. So, but I think our town was ahead of the curve, away from the beach area, but behind the 8 ball at the beach. So I think that's the reason. But I think all of us should, if we haven't, to complete the census, and then you're done.
Tim, maybe this communication is going to go out to the private beach associations regarding the short-term rentals. Maybe we could add a sentence or two to remind people.
Right, because if the census sends a census form to a house, even if you say, oh, I don't vote down there, you still need to respond and say there's nobody living there, and the census's reply is very quick. So it would be helpful and important to have a negative response for those. So if they are receiving the mail, then they need to do that. If for some reason it's in a mailbox at the house and it's collecting, that would be helpful to get that completed. So if they don't intend to vote or they do not reside in Old Lyme, they need to respond negatively. That would be a big help. The next item is the Old Saybrook Rotary Club called, and they are donating $2,000 to each of the 3 towns which the Rotary has membership. So it's Old Lyme, Westbrook, and Old Saybrook. And the purpose of the donation is for the first responder group for their equipment needs, having to do with PPE. So we have submitted we have talked to the Rotary, and so the town is approved to shop, and what the Rotary wanted last week was to get a list of the type of things that the departments would like, and then once they knew that, they'd get it approved, and then the between fire, ambulance, and police, that material could be ordered, and hopefully it'll come in quickly, and then the Rotary would pay $2,000 toward the acquisition. So it's very generous of the club, and we thank them, and I think that we're all set from the Rotary's perspective. Now it's a question of the ordering the material, and hopefully it'll come in quickly. And last item is the fire and ambulance apparatus parade. Friday, it's actually starting at 4 o'clock, and we'll get a schedule on the website and on a Facebook, but the fire, ambulance, and police are going to have a bunch of vehicles on a route through town, and they'll probably have the lights and sirens and kind of cheer people up, and it'll be about an hour and a half drive around through town, and they're going out on a bunch of different streets. It's pretty thorough, so that'll be kind of fun. So it'll be 4 to 5:30 or so, but the schedule will be on the website. They're trying to be fairly precise about when they're going by different streets, so people could rally and come out, and they'll know fairly accurately when to expect the parade to go through. And it will be rain or shine, so if it's a little bad weather, we'll want to get out and respond accordingly, but that should be kind of fun. So I will unmute here. I think I do. Okay, can the various people on the phone hear me? Okay, let me see. Maybe. Okay.
All participants have been unmuted.
I can hear you now, Tim.
Okay, good. Well, we have concluded the basic part of the agenda. We can open it up to public comment for those who wish to say something. And if you do, please state the name and then you can make your comment.
It's Doug Whalen, Chairman of the Old County Beach Club Association.
Okay, Doug?
I want to thank the Board of Selectmen for all your hard work, and we got to get through this crisis, but you're doing some good things. I want to let you know that we did send out a notice to all of our homeowners that they must follow all the governor's directives in relation to 7T, and we also notified all of our homeowners that if they are on the beach, they must also follow all of the guidelines, which is a 6-foot, social distancing, and we ask them all to wear masks while they're in the community. So we're going to stick by all of your guidelines and the guidelines coming out of CDC and the governor's office, and I hope that we can work together and get through all this very quickly and at least enjoy some of the summer.
Good comment. Thank you, Doug. Anyone else? Okay, then we will take up any other business that the selectmen might wish to bring to the table.
They're starting to pave Grassy Hill tomorrow. It should take about 2 weeks, depending on the weather. Week and a half to 2 weeks.
Thanks for bringing that up, because I noticed the website still had it starting last week.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, it was on my list too. Yeah.
Yeah, I know they're going to keep away from the bridge area.
Yeah, they're starting up a little towards Jewish driveway.
Yeah.
It's going to get all repaved when the bridge does.
Yeah,
Whatever happened to the bridge.
next year
Yeah.
after our archaeological study.
But that's all I have.
Okay.
I have a few things. I don't know where to start, actually. Plan of conservation and development. At one of our meetings, you indicated planning may have a delay on that. Do we have any update on that?
I know that the Planning Commission is working on that. Kim Groves, I think, is spending some time now helping Harold Thompson, the chairman, prepare for that. It's supposed to happen this year, so I think there's, I don't know all the details as to, they're probably doing a survey and other sorts of stuff. So I know they're focused on it, but as to where they stand, I'm not sure, but they are working on it.
Will the selectmen be asked for any input on the document?
Yeah, I think a survey goes out to all the residents to solicit. Maybe it's more of a questionnaire, and because I remember in the last one of them was, "What do you like about Old Lyme?" And 70% of the people responded the rural character and that sort of stuff. So I think there will be a town-wide questionnaire going out, if I'm not mistaken.
I think maybe what I'm trying to say is if there's anything in particular. I know one of the things that Chris and I have shared is our interest in getting a solar system up on the landfill. So something like that, if there's some initiatives that we think that would benefit the town and fit into the POCD, I was hoping we might get a chance to review and see if that is in the document.
Yeah, well, you've been involved with that.
Yeah, you can ask Harold, about that on the Planning Commission, maybe if they want to put in some sort of questionnaire with the town, be willing to do that. But it does come back to the selectmen and to review, they ultimately have to say, but
Okay, so it will come back to us? Okay.
it usually, if when I did it, I think I did it twice,
Okay.
but I believe it did go through the selectman's office.
Okay.
And
But there is a townwide questionnaire, isn't there?
yeah, they put out stuff. And I think they're gonna use some of the information that the EDC also just put out a questionnaire, so they're gonna try to, work both of them into it, so.
And is that due generally in the winter time frame, or?
I don't recall, for some reason I think October, but I could be totally wrong.
Okay, well, we could ask Carol for
Okay.
update.
Thank you. There's some discussion at some point about how to recognize the graduating seniors this year, given everything.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to let the selectmen know that they're trying to they're discussing some safe access, a way to recognize the students, and obviously they're working with the school and Safe Grad Committee, but I would expect we'll get some proposals coming before us relatively soon to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think one of my relatives who has a senior, the parents were going to be clued in a little more about what to expect and so forth. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's just a tough thing for those kids. Car break-ins. I guess we had we've had some ongoing thefts of cars. I know the police did a great job in March of putting out reminders to people to lock their cars and take their keys, but apparently over the weekend, over in the Witchwood area, we had some stolen vehicles and some cars were rifled through stuff, and the police, our trooper got right on it and put out another reminder to people, so I thank him very much. But it's a concern, and I think maybe any correspondence we're going to put out, we should do our part by mentioning that too. People lock their car, take your keys.
Yeah.
Well, we could also put that in that quarterly update,
Yeah, that would be coming around probably in May, I think.
that'd be a good time. Put that, like, up front.
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, I read the minutes from the Park and Rec Commission meeting that was held last week, and I had a lot of questions on what I read, and I don't know if you both are aware, but it seems that the commission is looking at putting in new signage to limit the size boats that can be driven in there, and maybe use the security fence for them to drive in versus the regular entrance, which then goes over grass that's newly seeded and there's no place for those people to park. And then I'm just frankly tired of seeing those meetings be directed just at the rowing group. And there's just no nice way to say it. It just seems unfair. And I think at this point, I would really like to see the parties be brought together to talk about what's fair, what's just, and I think what I read, they all agreed on some kind of new signage, and I'm not sure if they have the authority to do that. So I guess I'm tossing that to you, Tim, to get involved in this, because I think it's out of control, and I think it's unfair the way it's being handled.
Well, I know that some of the members of the association perhaps have purchased a property on the north side of the park, and they've been going through zoning. I think they have another step to go. And I think early on there was conversation about what would happen and so forth, but I think Park and Rec is indeed the custodian of the parks, and I agree with you. There should be a meeting between the rowing group. I don't know if it's a rowing association or a group of rowers having to do with that particular property or what, but to talk about it, because I think the commission is concerned about the transport of the boats from the property through the park. And these are not small boats. These are 25 to 30 some odd feet long. So I think the commission has a responsibility to make sure whatever happens is safe and in accordance with what that area of the park, which is a playground, a beach, and so forth, and just to make sure the hours of operation, the frequency of things happening, and all that. So I agree that they could hopefully sit down and hash it out. But Park and Rec has a responsibility to make sure it happens properly, and it's going to be difficult having one facility at one end of the park and another facility at the other end, and how they get back and forth. So the fact that that location was purchased and now they want to transport them, if the commission feels it's not a safe situation, they're reacting to the group that purchased the property, and so I don't know that they should expect whatever they want to walk boats through the park is okay. They need to hash it out with the commission. So,
well, the minutes indicated a discussion about putting a fence. So it just seemed that it was a one-sided discussion, and I think it's at a point where I think you have to get involved and bring the parties together to find a happy medium, because I just really believe this commission, for whatever reason, is not open to listening to certain parties. I don't think that's fair.
I think you can listen, but if what you're hearing is not going to work for the purpose of the park, I think that's got to be hashed out, and they ultimately have to be the shepherds of the park. And if they think what they're proposing in a way of the number of boats and where they go and all that, if they think that's not going to work out with the park, that's their job. So I think we could. I'll try to orchestrate a meeting, but I think they are the ones that have to call the shots there, and
but they have to be fair.
Yeah, well, fair is a defined term, and so if we could host a meeting with whomever and try to hash it out, but I'm sure they feel passionately about the plan that's evolving, so I'll be happy to have a meeting.
Okay. My last thought for the day. We've been getting some, I think all of us, some question on employee title, maybe salary. I think I sent you a note. I'm at the point where it seems to me that there's enough discussion and consternation going on that we need to think about having the titles or the job descriptions looked at and the steps. I know that's an expense, but I think there are people that have some really good points on all sides, and I don't know that we can resolve it without having our experts brought in to give us some recommendations. And it has been a while since things were looked at. Mm-hmm. But I feel for everybody involved that I've heard from, but I just think that we might need some input from a person that's their job. That's, like we had Randy Frank years ago. Perhaps it's time to do another review.
Well, could we also possibly hire a part-time or HR company
Well, I think that
handle something like this?
that would be, well, I think we do need that.
And other employee issues. I mean, I believe there's companies out there, aren't there?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe like the Council of Governments would know who other towns use, because I'm sure, not all these small towns have an HR department, So maybe there's companies that specialize in municipalities.
I think you've got a couple things. One is this review of the positions and so forth. But in terms of, I know Nicole has served as a de facto human resource person, and it'd be wonderful to have an outfit that could help out. So if we hire somebody or somebody terminates, they could handle some of the details, because it's probably pretty intensive to get the forms and everything put together to make something happen. So kind of an ongoing personnel function, as well as this other review, which we have these job descriptions and the titles and the rating and the compensation is based on a number of factors. So I guess that was done probably nearly 10 years ago, maybe. So that could be a good move, and if we could help out on the personnel side of it, that would be important, because I think the finance department shouldn't be overburdened with the personnel related things.
Yeah, I'm grateful to Nicole and Amy taking those functions on. We're lucky that they're intelligent people and they're able to do that. But if their job titles, if their job descriptions don't include that work, then they're being underpaid or they're being under-recognized. So that's an example of where I think a good evaluation, and I like Chris's idea about having a firm on contract to address some of these things too. But it's getting to the point, it's at a point where I think something needs to get done.
Even if they were 1 day a week or on call or something. Do you know of any companies like that by any chance? Other towns must have something like that.
Sure, and I think CCM, their magazine, that people advertise their expertise, but I think it's time.
Well, maybe we can look into that.
Yeah.
And try to figure out something.
Okay.
Because Nicole's doing a lot of extra stuff. She doesn't want to. Yes.
Can I say something? I think those are both great ideas. I would just look ahead one more step, that if we do have a study of all the positions and a plan of implementing whatever those recommendations are. If there's people underpaid, if there's people overpaid, where do we go from there as far as the budget? You know what I mean? Just something to think about.
That's a very good point.
Okay, very good. Anything else? All right, hearing none. I guess we could entertain a motion to adjourn.
So we moved to 5:30?
6:30.
6:30?
Well,
5:30.
This is 6:30. Oh, 5:30. 5:30.
5:30.
Excellent. Okay, move to adjourn at 5:30. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And thank you on the line. So keep one of these. While I didn't want to get into this, but I did have Mikhail give me some advice on unused vacation and comp time. We have, I had Amy pull